Uh, Hi, Sports Hub fans. We are back. The Super Bowl's over with. The hangover's gone. Everyone's now on a diet, trying to get over the burgers and ribs. But the NFL never stops. It is 365 days a year, and so we are now rolling on to the draft. So I've got the great pleasure to be able to introduce Oliver Hodgkinson. I balls that up. From Pro Football Network, who's been kind enough to join us today to just talk through some of the key prospects we're going to be seeing later today, this week, rolling into the draft, and then hopefully which one of those can help lead their teams to the Super Bowl next year, which is what all rookies want. Oliver, thank you so much for taking the time. It's amazing to have you on. I just wanted to get started. I wanted to get started with kind of just a question on you, so people from outside can get to know you a little bit. How long have you been following the draft and analyzing players? But then I know that you haven't been doing it full time as your primary job the whole time. So when was the line in the sand when you were able to, I say, live the dream until you're in the middle of it, but do what lots of people want to do?
I appreciate it. Let me start by saying I appreciate you taking the time to have me on. Let me come on and talk about the NFL draft, because it's as you said, never stops. The NFL never sleeps. This process, the NFL draft process, never sleeps. We've been talking and looking and viewing and grading and evaluating these prospects pretty much since the end of the last NFL draft. But for me, I've been a full-time draft analyst now for Pro Football Network for just over a year. Started in January 2021. I've been an NFL and college football fan for about 12 years. My brother got me into it. Didn't understand, like a lot of people in this country, didn't understand the game, couldn't figure out why they always stopping and starting. Just didn't understand it, didn't get it, but once you sit down and you appreciate the chess match that is the NFL, you understand the strategy and everything that goes into it. I fell in love, and I was lucky enough just over 3 years ago to be given the opportunity to start writing about college football for a site in the UK called 99 Yards. Got the opportunity to interview some draft prospects as part of that, and went from there and written for the Touchdown in the UK, and started writing for Pro Football Network when we were just a small company. Group of fans who started a company to talk about football, and now 2 years later the company is a big media entity in the States, and I've had the privilege, and you mentioned you said it, living the dream, and it is a dream. I get to get up every day and go to work and watch NFL draft prospects and get immersed in football, and it's I love it. So that's this time of year is super busy. You mentioned this week the NFL Combine. That's a real important part of the process. Never stops though. Never stops.
Yeah, absolutely. The NFL never stops, and I think it's always an important thing for people, particularly new people, to understand the general way the NFL wants to work. It doesn't work this way, but the way it wants to work is it wants to give an advantage to the teams with the poorer records, to be able to hand select essentially the best prospects from the college game. Very different from what we have over here in any of our major sports, particularly football. Very difficult to run those type of things. But essentially, the worst teams should get better. The best teams should come back to the middle, and you should have everything. Now, the NFL doesn't always work that way. The Patriots dynasty for nearly 20 years, notwithstanding, actually, if you take them out of it, the NFL does churn through teams. I think there hasn't been a back-to-back Super Bowl winner since the Patriots did it in the early 2000s. So for people like yourself, you are obviously looking at a small time frame in a player's life, I suppose. Probably the 2 years between maybe late sophomore and then potentially into senior. Do you have a strategy when you're going to start each season once the drafts happen? When do you start next year, 2023? Does that start the moment this finishes, or do you give this? Obviously, I'm sure you give yourself a break, or have you already started it a little bit, or where do you start?
I suppose it's an ever-evolving process is probably the best way to look at it, because you look at a guy like in this class, Derek Stingley, who was outstanding as a freshman for LSU in 2019. You've already got that kid earmarked as a 2022 NFL draft prospect 3 years before he's even, he's eligible for the NFL draft. So it's constantly evolving. In terms of really getting down to the nitty gritty of it, it started really the day after the 2021 NFL draft for this cycle, and we'd already got a watch list of players. We'd already put out a 2022 NFL mock draft by sort of mid-March of 2021. So you start with a watch list, kids that are going to be eligible in this class, real standout guys like Will Anderson from Alabama for next year. So you start with that watch list. We put together top 10s at each position, and then it grows from there as the season progresses. Hours in front of the TV watching college football on a Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, putting kids on watch lists. So it might shine in one game, stick him on the list, and we'll get to him later on and figure out the true story behind his entire game. And that starts really ramping up as soon as the college football season is going back and doing final checks on players. And then as the process goes through all-star games and the combine, you're checking numbers versus what you've seen on tape. And it's just, it's a never-ending continuous process. I think we released our first top 300 prospects for this class in early October of last year. So you're always looking ahead. You're always looking ahead, and even now, kids that are coming out of high school like Arch Manning, the quarterback, famous surname. People are already talking about what can this kid do in the 2026 NFL draft class. It's craziness, but like you say, it just never stops. It's an enjoyable process to be a part of.
Yeah, I can imagine. Funny. With Arch Manning, I listen to a lot of ESPN. It's just the way my part of my fandom evolved in a really special holiday in the West Indies, and I started listening to Mike and Mike because it happened to be on, and I was up early with jet lag, and so I kind of always followed ESPN. They had a really interesting question: who will be the best quarterback in the NFL in 5 years' time? And one of the people said, "Well, it'll be Arch Manning." Who's not actually, I don't think he's actually played a college game yet. He's going to come out. So not to keep you, I mean, that runs on perfectly to kind of the first point. Everybody gets bored of this question, but the truth is the quarterbacks kind of rule the roost. So of the quarterbacks this year, everybody says it may not be as good as previous years, and certainly doesn't have the blue chipper in Trevor Lawrence had last year. I guess then we all picked him apart and said he was terrible. But I was there at his first victory in London. He didn't look too bad to me. Of the quarterbacks that everybody's talking about, or who, in your opinion, I guess the obvious questions would be NFL ready now, who may take a little bit of time, and someone I believe will be picked in the top 15. Which of the quarterbacks is likely to rocket up boards over the next kind of month?
Yeah, you mentioned this quarterback class, and it hasn't got the blue chip talent. It's not got the historic up top talent that we saw last year. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence and Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones. 5 early first-round prospects in a historic class. So this year's class was always kind of, I suppose, on a hide into nothing from the get-go. But no, you're right. There isn't a Trevor Lawrence. I don't have a first-round grade on any of these 2022 NFL draft quarterbacks. But that's not to say that none of them will go first round. In fact, it's very plausible that 3 or 4 of these quarterbacks will go first round, just based on purely. You mentioned it in the introduction there. Quarterback position is such a pivotal part of the sport. There's also, I don't think there's ever been such a high demand for quarterbacks as there has been over this last couple of years. You're going to have the Denver Broncos probably needing a quarterback. The Pittsburgh Steelers are probably going to need a quarterback. Washington football team, or Washington Commanders, should I say, got so used to calling them the football team in this last year. They're almost certainly going to need a quarterback because Ryan Fitzpatrick and Taylor Heineke are on it. So there's so many teams that need a quarterback that some of these guys are going to ultimately go first round. For me, pro-ready is an interesting statement because look how many people said Trevor Lawrence is pro-ready and he really struggled in Jacksonville because of his situation, whereas Mac Jones goes into New England, and the situation surrounding him allowed him to succeed probably more than any of the other quarterbacks in that class, just based on pure situation alone. But a solid all-round quarterback prospect in this class, Kenny Pickett, for me, is just solid. That's the best way I can put it. He's an intelligent guy who doesn't make a super large amount of mistakes. He's got a decent arm, almost showcases elite arm talent at times with his ability to lay the ball into tight windows, how he can throw from different angles, throws on the move, decent in terms of off script, is decently mobile, not an elite mobile quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but solid in that regard. Decent size as well. When you think about how the NFL, the prototype for the quarterback position at the NFL, he's 6'3", 221 pounds. So he's, decent stature at that quarterback position as well. So solid quarterback with some question marks. Hand size is going to become a tiring subject in this draft class, but Kenny Pickett has got historically small hands. We've been led to believe his double jointed thumb actually negates some of that hand size disadvantage. But he didn't measure at the Senior Bowl, which added further to those questions. He's got some other question marks there that kind of inhibit his stock, but he's coming off the back of an exceptional season statistically for Pitt, one of the greatest seasons in Pitt history and ACC history. So a solid guy who a lot of people have as the quarterback one of this class, but you asked for a guy who could potentially ascend to the top of the class, and for me, that's Malik Willis. You're talking about a kid with an elite arm. Kenny Pickett's got a good arm. He does a lot of things well. Malik Willis has got an elite arm, a howitzer of an arm. He could lay the ball anywhere downfield that you like, zip on short and intermediate throws, all the arm angles. He's incredibly mobile. He's such an impressive creator out of structure, off script. He can churn up. He's had in the last 2 years over 1,800 rushing yards and 20 odd touchdowns as with his legs alone. And then the arm talent that goes with that as well. Incredible leader as well. Kid who's a man of faith, who is very humble, talks only about what he can do to help his team. I was saying yesterday in an interview, I had the opportunity to speak with Malik Willis during his breakout season for Liberty in 2020. And he was at that time earning comparison to Cam Newton because of his ability with his arm, ability with his legs. And I asked him the question about the comparison, and he was just like, look, I don't listen to that. I don't listen to comparisons. All I care about is helping this team win. All I care about is getting a result for this team, and it's not about me. And that's the kind of kid that he is. And you've seen that at the Senior Bowl this last couple of weeks, where teams have already started falling in love with what this kid is off the field as well as what he is on the field. We mentioned the Pittsburgh Steelers as a team that need a quarterback. They're apparently head over heels in love with Malik Willis and what he brings to the field and off the field. So, yeah, for me, he's the best quarterback in this class in terms of pure ceiling, pure ability. He's a work in progress. He's going to need patience. There's a lot to work on in terms of his ability to process, his ability to read. But a lot of that has come also from how he's had to play for Liberty. He's played behind a dire offensive line with a real lack of wide receiver talent around him as well. So he's had to kind of be the hero for that Liberty offense, and that does lead you to make hero ball throws that even at the college level, let alone the NFL level, are going to get you in trouble. But I think if he lands with a team that can be patient with him, that can surround him with talent, protect him, you're going to get a kid who can light the NFL on fire if everything falls into place.
I mean, it's a really interesting way you talk about him. I think the everybody talks about how the things that go into being a kind of a top quarterback, and I think we all see. I think howitzer of an arm isn't they're not devoid in college football or the NFL. There's quite a lot of players with great arms and fantastic and going for it. But I think someone like Joe Burrow showed that the character, both on and off the field, working every day, the tape sessions, the demands in practice, the expectation to win, the expectation for victory really seems to go quite a long way. You are, at the end of the day, in your early 20s, walking into a room full of grown men with families and mortgages and some of them girlfriends, etc. And they're not going to just follow you because you did well in college, because quite frankly, they all did well in college. Very few of them are college busts, if you like. Almost pretty much all of them, 99% college success stories. So that leadership, that demand for team seems to be the one. And then, of course, we're probably looking quite interestingly into the NFL. Some of the, would we say, more experienced quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, even Kyler Murray, showing, I don't know, lack of team leadership, I think, in and around whether it be their contracts and things like that. So I think a lot of people were talking about Aaron Rodgers being maybe the number one target for teams that are looking for. And I wonder if these draft prospects, once teams get their hands on them, because quite frankly, head coaches and not quite GMs, but certainly head coaches and quarterback coaches and offensive coordinators haven't really spent any time on these people, on these guys, watching tape or even speaking to them. And that's that process now. I think what people forget is the head coach has not really any care in the world about what's going on in college until his season finishes. And then, yes, he's going to switch to. And someone like Mike Tomlin, who definitely needs a quarterback, I believe, and I think most people do, you can see someone like Willis and Tomlin being a match made in heaven. They're probably set up well to run the ball. And I think the Steelers are possibly the best organization at drafting receivers anywhere in the draft. I think if the Steelers pick up a receiver in fantasy, I'm picking up that receiver. He's clearly going to be good. They just seem to have a knack in that positional room. I don't want to lead too far, but everyone talks about quarterbacks. My favorite position, personally, is always in the trenches on the line, off offensive lineman and defensive lineman. It's my favorite position. I was lucky enough to play defensive line for a short period of time in London. I'm not saying it's all about, but for me, it's the most fun. I think if anyone's not too much of a fan, start watching the offensive line more, start watching the defensive line more. So much goes on. We were lucky in the Super Bowl to see a pretty special defensive lineman, a pretty special performance by 99 Aaron Donald. I would talk about, but let's talk about the offensive line. The Bengals struggled because they couldn't block. The Bengals will obviously be in the market, but many teams should be in the market for offensive linemen. Are there any standout ones that are, we call them plug and play? Are there any areas where you would traditionally look? We always say, go and look for a strong farm boy from Iowa who's going to maul down people and provide you a running game and play well in the dirt and in the mud. Is there anyone that you're looking at that you're saying, they jump off the page and those are the type of players they're looking for?
There's more. This is one of the great things about the 2022 NFL draft. And I completely agree with you. Football is won and lost in the trenches. You can have the best quarterback in the world, but if you haven't got the offensive line to protect him, he's no good. And the defensive line, if your defensive line's no good, you can have the best cornerbacks in the world, and you're still going to have the same result. It's not going to pan out. So yeah, football's won and lost in the trenches. And a team like the New York Giants are going to have to really address both sides of the ball with their early round picks. There's plenty of talent on both sides of the trenches in this 2022 NFL draft. We'll start with the offensive line. You mentioned Iowa farm boys. Tyler Linderbaum, the center out of Iowa. He's for me one of my favorite prospects in this entire NFL draft class. And ironically, one of the knocks on him is he's not over 300 pounds. So we talk about big farm boys from Iowa, but actually he's a little on the slender side for an NFL center, but incredible wrestler at high school level. And you'll know from playing defensive line, that ability to understand and command leverage is crucially important. That's what Tyler Linderbaum brings to the pivot at the NFL level. He's incredibly strong, incredible understanding of leverage, incredible athlete as well, very fast for his size. I remember watching an Iowa game from 2020 while I was watching another prospect. And Tyler Linderbaum is going toe-to-toe down the field with running back Tyler Goodson, who isn't any slouch by any stretch of the imagination. Incredible athlete. He's a guy that the Bengals could potentially look at. If anything, they need an offensive tackle and guard. But if he's still knocking around when the Bengals selected 31, hell, you pick him up, you put him at the pivot, and you build around him, because he's an incredible player. He beat Tampa Bay Buccaneers tackle Tristan Wirfs at high school wrestling. There's quite a considerable size difference between those two, and that just shows how Linderbaum can control leverage. So Tyler Linderbaum, one of my favorite prospects as a center. But offensive tackle wise, you're going to probably see an offensive tackle go number 1 overall in Evan Neal out of Alabama. Again, another incredible athlete, 6'7", 350 pounds off the top of my head, something like that, but moves really well. Exceptionally strong. Has played left tackle, right tackle, and guard for Alabama. Has the college tendency to lunge a little bit, which is one of the knocks on him. Is can lunge a little bit, leave him a little unbalanced. But I feel like he's really improved in that respect this year as he's transitioned from right tackle to left tackle. So he's got everything I think that you look for in a day one starter at offensive tackle. Then there's Ike Mekwonu, the offensive tackle out of NC State, another kid who has excelled at guard and tackle. Came into this year for me as an elite offensive guard prospect, but spent the whole year at left tackle for NC State. A real mauler with athletic ability, violent, nasty, does the stuff that you want to see an offensive lineman doing. Absolutely thrives on putting guys in the dirt, gets downfield and takes out guys in the secondary. Bubba Bolden from Miami was absolutely obliterated by him on a play in, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. That kid's probably still got a mark on him from where Ike Mekwonu put him in the dirt. He's a real physical, nasty mauler, who's also got great off-field personality. He's a smiling, happy chat. The two off-field and on-field couldn't be further apart. It's a bespectacled kid who smiles all the time, and you get him on the field and he is nasty as hell. So Ike Mekwonu, Evan Neal, Tyler Linderbaum right at the top of this class. Charles Cross, who out of Mississippi State, a true left tackle, who is a little bit more slender. He's bulked up a little this year, added a lot of muscle, but real athlete. Again, same mentality, real nasty, vicious, can do it on the ground, can do it as a pass protector. The athleticism as a pass protector is obvious against even the most athletic edge rushers who can walk around the outside track. He's a kid who I was really high on coming to the season. He's just improved all the way through. And those guys, for me, Linderbaum, Neal, Ike Mekwonu, Charles Cross, all top 10 prospects in the class. So you're looking at a really strong class at the top. And then there's guys throughout the rest of the 3 days who could potentially come in and make an impact. Yeah,
and the subtleties of offensive linemen, you need them nasty. You can play nice, but you need them nasty. Things like, I always have a really big belief. I always look for an offensive lineman when they do get to pull. It's the punishment they're willing to inflict. They need to. At the end of the day, franchises are spending, well, now I think the Raiders are talking about upwards of £40 million on their quarterback. You actually need the big five up front and a couple more to put their bodies on the line. And when they get that opportunity at that little cornerback or that blitzing safety, to make sure that person, that little person never comes back into the big man's area. And just to make, I'm not that big too. It was a lot of fun messing around with some 6 foot plus 300-pound boys. It wasn't that much fun. But on the defensive line, like I said, I think the rumors are that the Super Bowl MVP was picked about 1 minute 50 to go rather than at the end of the game. Aaron Donald completely wrecked the end of the game for the Cincinnati Bengals. And I was high on the Bengals, and I was sitting pretty thinking, well, they're just going to march up the field and score. Aaron Donald said, no way, no how. I think on the third down play, he held the offensive lineman with one arm, made a single arm tackle with the other one on a very sturdy running back. And then obviously everyone knows what he did at the end of the game, just completely slamming the door shut. The thing I always find, I'm not going to say are there any Aaron Donalds. I think he's a very difficult one to quantify because he puts a lot together. But but Aaron Donald shows the devastating ability a tackle has, more than just being a run stuffer. But in that real key trenches, the center, two guards, and those D tackles or nose or tackles, is there anyone that just pops out that says, hold on a second, they may get some Aaron Donald comparisons, park those, but they are going to be disruptive at the next level. And that's what everyone's just seen. And I think a few people are going to be looking for that for themselves.
Yeah, no one's Aaron Donald, let's be honest. That's a comparison that I don't think any college player is ever going to be able to live up to. Though having said that, Jalen Twyman in last year's class, who was a teammate of Aaron Donald, went to the same program as Aaron Donald at Pitt. He wore the 97 at Pitt. He same as Aaron Donald, who similar sort of size, very similar production levels. He was often called the baby Aaron Donald, and I kind of feel sorry for that kid that he had to live with that comparison, because you can never live up to that reputation. But there's some real good interior defensive linemen in this class. Not one of the positions that at the start of the season I thought there was a truly devastatingly large amount of talent at, but there is. And you watch Jordan Davis, for example, out of Georgia. 6'6", 350 pounds, 360 pounds, whatever he is, moves incredibly well. We've talked about Joe Burrow earlier on, and there's a play from the 2019 season, I think it was, where you watched Jordan Davis sprint from the center of the field to the sideline to take down Joe Burrow, who'd escaped the pocket and scrambled. And that's the athletic ability that Jordan Davis brings to the field. You look at a guy of his size and you think, oh no, he's just that run stuffer. He just commands space at the heart of the defensive line. But he is more than that. He's a real, true, genuine athlete who's strong as well. But he's got good lateral agility. He's got good, overall speed. Plays the game fast. Real monster who can eat up 2, 3, double teams, triple teams, lets the rest of the Georgia defense go to work. So he's a kid that will command attention. One of the big knocks is he doesn't bring a large amount of pass rush threat, more of a run stuffer. But he's really, for me, improved in that regard this year. You've seen him get into the backfield a couple of times as this Georgia defense has imposed its will on the whole of college football and led them to a national championship. So Jordan Davis is a guy. Travis Jones out of UConn is a guy who is really ascending in this class. Not quite the same sort of size as Jordan Davis, but similarly strong against the run, because he is a stout, bulky offensive lineman. I think he trimmed down to about 333 pounds. He, at one point, was up there 353, 355. Trimmed down to 333, I think, on his 6'3" frame. Really impressed at the Senior Bowl. And he is a kid who has got some genuine pass rush upside as well. I think he's probably a second-round guy at the moment, though his performances at the Senior Bowl, he tests well at the Combine this week. He could force himself into that first-round conversation at the back end of the first round. You look at a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have got free agents all over the place, especially on the defensive line. He could be a guy who you put alongside Vita Vea, and holy hell, you've got a ready-made Ndamukong Suh replacement in Travis Jones. There's one guy I'm super excited by and intrigued by, who kind of blurs the lines between a defensive tackle and your traditional edge rusher, and that's Trayvon Walker out of Georgia. The kid who's played at 290 for the Bulldogs, a guy who's played at 275 as a true edge rusher for the Bulldogs. He's got that 6'5", I think it is, frame that could probably hold up to 300 pounds quite easily. He's played all the way from the nose out to rushing from a wide alignment at the Bulldogs, and he is an athlete. Like lateral agility like you haven't seen. Like, this kid can jump from the A gap to the B gap as if he's been teleported there. And strong, technically sound with his hands, fast hand works, really strong punch for a kid that played at 275 this year. I think he blurs the lines between what's possible between a defensive tackle and an edge rusher. And if you're an NFL team, you're probably going to get a guy in Trayvon Walker who you can plug in and play anywhere on the defensive line and have success with. I think he offers real versatility, which is obviously a huge thing in 2000 in the NFL.
Yeah, I think the defensive players like Micah Parsons, who kind of switched from a linebacker, edge rusher, middle linebacker, signal caller, shows the potential versatilities that more and more defensive coordinators are looking for. I think as more teams look to spread the field, lots more shotgun, you have to be multifaceted. You can't just sit and say, I do one thing, unless obviously that one thing is unbelievably exceptional, but very few humans walk the earth being able to be that exceptional in any one thing. It's really interesting for you to kind of talk about that. I wonder, because you've mentioned weight quite a lot. Weight isn't always the be all and end all, but it is very important. And most front offices will essentially just mark people out because they're not naturally heavy enough, or sometimes, well, they probably should do it more often on offensive linemen. They're just too heavy, and they're going to kick the burger out. But when you're kind of reviewing and you're looking at who's done what and what's done who, weight's hugely important depending on the position. Is that something you taking into consideration when you're doing your write-ups and your pieces?
It depends. I mean, you look at a guy like Deontay Brown out of Alabama, who was in last year's class. He was 360 pounds on something like 6'3", 6'4" frame, and he looked it. He looked every bit of that weight. He couldn't move very well. Really struggled when it came to the combine with athletic testing, and you could see it on tape. You know, at Alabama, so he was slow to move, slow to react because of that weight. So, if the weight is impacting the game negatively, whether it's being undersized or oversized, it's something you've got to take into consideration. But primarily, you don't look at you don't look at the weight before you turn on the tape. And if any numbers that come afterwards are kind of they're helping quantify and clarify what you've seen on tape, I think, as someone who's evaluating a prospect. But you do know that the NFL do look at that, and they will look at potentially a guy like Tyler Linderbaum, who is under 300 pounds as an offensive lineman, and say, well, that kid's undersized, and maybe knock him for it. Now, that's rightly or wrongly, that's but that is the process. In the same way that some of the NFL teams really put stock into the times that we're going to see at the combine this week. You could watch a kid who his entire college career who is clearly fast on tape, but then maybe doesn't run a very good 40-yard dash time, and teams are all out on him. Well, you're putting too much into that. You're putting too much into that 40-yard dash time. You don't know what's gone into that. We've seen players in the past who have performed terribly at the combine who have then gone on to have exceptional careers, or vice versa, performed. Look at John Ross, the wide receiver that Cincinnati took in the first round, 4.22 at the combine in 2018, and never really lived up to that in the NFL. So numbers, be it weight, be it the time they run in a 40-yard dash, they're not. They're a part of the picture. They're a part of the puzzle, but they're not like you say. It's not the be all and end all of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I'm a Raiders fan, so we have had our fair share of very fast combine runners that either A, couldn't catch, or B, can't stay on the field. So you're right. Although I am very much looking forward to my favourite thing from the combine every single year, which is when they make offensive linemen run 40-yard dash. I just never in a million years understand why an agent would allow them to do it, unless they're weirdly fast. But most of them, if they run 5.5 seconds, I'm all good. I'm fine. That's not too bad. Listen, I've held you for ages. I just wanted to say, look, I just wanted to get from you. Is there any player or players, up to you, that you want to kind of shine at this point? Someone maybe you've spoken to, someone from a smaller school, someone that you want people to kind of pay maybe more attention to, that's kind of impressed you?
There's a couple of guys. So Andrew Booth Jr., the cornerback out of Clemson, it's really interesting watching this process unfold, because this is a kid who, for me, I think is the best cornerback in the 2022 NFL draft class. And there's also people who have a 3rd round grade on Andrew Booth. I think it's really interesting. There are there's stories out there about Andrew Booth in terms of there may be an injury that's impacting his stock that certainly myself, who isn't privy to that information, don't know about. It's not something I've seen on the field. There are questions that Andrew Booth isn't a physical cornerback. Well, I've spent hours watching Andrew Booth play football for Clemson and studying his all-22 tape. Andrew Booth is a physical cornerback. I don't know how you watch that kid and say he's not physical. Both of those Clemson cornerbacks in this class, Andrew Booth and Mario Goodrich, real physical, real strong against the run support, run support. Andrew Booth is a freak athlete, man. I'm really looking forward to seeing how he tests at the combine, because for me, one of the first things that I wrote down as I was doing this scouting report was athletic, and I wrote it in big capital letters. I put a little square box around it on my paperwork, and I was like, this kid like flies to the ball. He's incredible, like ball skills. Like, he's a former wide receiver, so you expect him to be able to catch ball, right? Ball tracking's incredible. Vertical athleticism is off the charts. Like, you watch him go up and make a play on the ball with one hand, high pointing it, jumping backwards. Like, he's insane. For me, he's the best cornerback in this class. So if people don't feel like he is, I would urge him to go back and watch the tape. I think it's just a guy who I don't see how you don't think he's a first round prospect. But there's underlying things. If they're there, they're there. People, scouting is subjective as well. There's certainly areas that he needs to improve, as there is with all prospects. So, but yeah, Andrew Booth's a kid. I don't think there's certainly more. He's certainly more divisive than I feel like he should be. But then let's talk about Christian Watson, the wide receiver out of North Dakota State. You talked about the Las Vegas Raiders and their affinity for pacey wide receivers. This is a kid who is 6'4", 211 pounds, has a high school recorded 4.4 40-yard dash, which there's absolutely no reason to believe he won't run again this week. He's been used as like a weapon. There's no other way to put it. He's an offensive weapon. Outside wide receiver out of the slot, run out the backfield, hand it off on jet motion, jet sweeps in motion. Incredible athlete in terms of not just speed, but for his size, how he moves in the open field, his ability to cut. One of the things that I really wanted to see from him as the process developed, so like at the Senior Bowl, was sometimes he looks like he rounds off his roots a little bit, which when he's got that athletic ability, you want to be able to see him move twitchy, you want to see him break sharply. And some of his NDSU tape, it was like, well, that's not there. He kind of rounds off his routes a little bit. But at the Senior Bowl, he was out there putting it all out there. And he's a kid for me who I think is a comfortable day two prospect, who not everyone knows about yet. I think people are starting to figure it out. The Senior Bowl really helped him in this process, but there's still some little conversations you see him online. Excuse me. You see him online about, well, Christian Watson can't run this, and he won't do this. But trust me, Christian Watson will do this, because this kid is a special talent from the FCS level.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I wonder, you kind of have to give some of the rumours a little bit of pinch of salt. I do wonder if teams are out there sabotaging players so they fall in their laps. I would vote the New England Patriots are a key component of such dark arts. It's already interesting. Look, it's been hugely interesting talking to you. We would absolutely love to do it again. Thank you for bringing such great insight and all the players. So if you're up for it, we'll do it again. I'll allow you to enjoy the combine. Probably busy in a combine, but I'll enjoy the combine just having it on. But yeah, thank you so much. Do you want to drop your social handles for anyone that will give you a follow?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me personally at OJ Hodgkinson on Twitter, and follow at PFN365 as well, Pro Football Network. We've got a draft guide dropping very, very soon. Well worth your time checking that out. And if you go to profootballnetwork.com/NFL draft, you can find all our NFL draft content.
That's awesome. I'll obviously be dropping the links in so people make it easier for people to find. But thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure and enjoy. And when you saw me walking around, it's because my daughter was screaming at me about Topsy.
I love it. Appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to have me on.
No, thank you so much. Listen, Make sure you follow Oliver. It's the NFL draft is an amazing period of time. If you're not into it, probably get into it. It's hugely important. And if you are into it, you already know. And if you're a fantasy fan, you should definitely pay attention to it, because these are the guys that you should be. There's a couple of guys that you may select that someone like Oliver will be able to help you with that other people don't know about. So make sure you read up on his stuff. He's excellent. He gets great interviews. He does great interviews as well with the prospects. So do follow us all. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll speak soon.